crisis. Is it real? Does it exist? And how do we manage it? My guest today is Susan Kiamba. She's the CEO of Blue Elite, and she wears many hats. She's a career coach, she's a podcaster, and she's a lecturer at the Riara University. Let's hear what she has to say about this. So, from a university lecturer's point of view, a lecturer who actually teaches undergrads who fall squarely in the group of early 20s to late 20s. What have you seen that points to the evidence that there is actually quarter-life crisis?
Cool. So that's a good question. And it's funny that we are doing this interview today because, like I was mentioning earlier, I've been grading some assignments. So I teach corporate world skills, which is essentially employability skills, preparing people for the workplace. So as part of the assignment, I had people, I asked them to write me a short paragraph in answer to the tell me about yourself question that always keeps coming up in interviews. And then I gave them guidelines. I said, you weren't allowed to tell me anything about the course you're studying, where you live, or anything to do with the type of work you do. So it had to be something completely different.
Yeah. And
then later, after people answered and some went crazy, they told me about how they love music and how they feel they can connect and etc. and etc. and etc. So later when I asked them, okay, so how was the assignment? How hard was it? How simple was it? Quite a number of them said they struggled because they felt like they couldn't quite figure out who they were. And they felt like they were struggling with identity. And they felt like as time goes by, they are different people from whom they've always known. So I think that's one serious pointer towards the quarter life crisis, because the quarter life is where you're questioning and you're wondering, wait, who am I? What's this life about? Like, what exactly should I expect? Then again, just this past week, there was another assignment that was people recording videos of why they chose the course they chose.
Okay.
And I had quite a number of them. I think from a class of about 70, I had about 5 of them tell me how coming in, they weren't sure what to expect. They have been feeling lost, but then as they've continued with the program and as they've continued with the degree that they chose, they began to find themselves. And so for me, that really speaks to the idea that your 20-something-year-old is actually just struggling. I'm struggling with the idea that they had a dream. That dream might have been cut short when the grades didn't actually work out, and you're finding people studying something they don't want to study. I've had students tell me, this degree is for my parents. I'm interested in something completely different. I come here because they said I must. So I submit assignments. I don't care whether you grade me high, you grade me in the middle, you grade me low, because it's not really what I want. I want out, but my parents have said I can only get out through this program. And so I think those are 3 pointers to just how there's a struggle that's happening with our 20-something-year-olds about what I want and what I thought I'd want, where I am and where I thought I'd be. And I just feel like I want to quit my life, quit my job, quit school, quit everything. Like, there's actually a guy who told me that he quit because he was feeling trapped. He hadn't signed up for the historical, permanent, and pensionable. He had learned everything he could learn in his role. And then the next role actually required somebody with 10 years experience. And he said, wait, 10 years experience, never going to happen. I've been here 2 years and I've gotten everything. You can't expect me to be here for another 8, looking for 10 years experience, all in the name of career growth. So he quit. And he went and I think started working online or started a business, one of the two. But the idea is he felt trapped. He felt he wasn't learning, he wasn't growing, he was disillusioned about his career. So he quit.
Okay. This person who quit, were they part of your students, or is it in your other?
Yes.
Okay.
One of my students, that was one of my students, and he was contrasting his experience with one of with his parent who had worked for the same organization for 40 years.
Yeah.
And somehow he had stuck it out. He could not imagine himself with one organization for 40 years. And after 2 years, he's bored, he's tired, he just wants out.
Okay. So there's an issue here. Clearly, the generations have a disconnect. Their parents worked in a different era, and we are seeing the younger people not conforming to that, which also is one of the things that I seem to see a lot that brings a crisis, especially between parents and their 20-somethings. Do you see that as well?
I see that a lot, because one of the things that I hear either from the young people, the 20-something-year-olds, or the early career professionals who I mentor is, I want a different life from what my parents had. I don't want to have to work for the rest of my life to just retire when I'm old and tired. I actually want to retire in the next 10 years. I need to live the life I want, not work so hard for this supposed life that actually never comes. Because by the time you're retiring, you're too tired to enjoy this life you've been waiting to enjoy. And they are saying, why do I have to wait 40 years? Why can't I enjoy this now? Why can't I enjoy this sooner? Why can't I enjoy this in the next 10 years? And of course, it's a bone of contention, because your parent is going to say, no, an employer is going to think you're flaky if you're always moving jobs. Or no one's going to understand if you quit because you're bored. Like, who quits because they're bored? You should stick it out. So there's definitely that disconnect, especially where parents aren't necessarily open to hearing from the other side and getting to understand a different perspective. So that's what I've seen with my mentees, with my students, and even a few of my own relatives.
Okay. What advice would you give parents now that the disconnect is glaring?
So the parents, I'd say, listen more, speak less. Not that there's anything wrong with all the advice you're going to give, because I mean, everyone has to give advice. No one ever wants to take it, but everyone likes to give advice. And as a parent, I give advice all the time. Solicited and unsolicited advice for that matter. So I'd say for the parents, listen more and ask more questions. And you're asking your questions to understand, not to hit someone over the head, not to guilt anybody, not to use the information that somebody shares to crucify them or to make your point. Because I think sometimes as parents, we are always looking for evidence to support our standpoint. And that can come at the expense of actually hearing the other person and understanding them in such a way that you get closer to each other rather than drawing you apart. So, for example, for parents, it's a question of asking if your young person comes and makes a comment and says, I'm doomed. And instead of saying, no, you're not doomed, because that's our automatic response, ask, what makes you think you're doomed? Or what happened? How did we get here? What was the journey? What was the story? And as you ask more questions, it brings about a conversation that goes and can potentially go in multiple directions and help you understand them better. And at the same time, help them understand that you have wisdom to share, and your wisdom is based on experience. And it's also just based on observation, because for sure, if you've lived longer, you know more. But simply because you know more doesn't mean you know everything. And there's always something you can learn. So my advice to parents, listen more and ask more questions, and ask to understand, not to crucify.